The Idaho Falls Arts Council brings acts from all over the world to Eastern Idaho, and a band that's performing later this month is a band you may or may not have heard of. It's called Skerryvore, and it's based in Scotland. I am talking over Zoom today with one of the band's members, Daniel Gillespie. Daniel, thanks for taking some.
Hello. Great. Thanks for your time. Pleasure to speak to you.
Yeah. You're in sunny Florida today.
Yeah, we just arrived here last night. We started the US tour in the Midwest and encountered some tornadoes and rain, lightning storms, hailstorms, snow. So we're very happy to be in Florida now for the next 4 or 5 nights.
Yeah.
Especially if you're from Scotland and you just had the Scottish winter as well. It's even nicer to be in the sun. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is it cold in Scotland?
It's actually not bad now. It's I was speaking to family earlier on, and they're in the Isle of Skye at the moment, and it's really nice there as well. So it's probably the coldest we've seen the Midwest, or the most like Scotland we've seen the Midwest weather recently there. So we were glad to get to the warmth and the sunshine yesterday.
Yeah. Well, hopefully when you visit Idaho Falls, which is going to be the 22nd.
Yep, 22nd, yeah.
Hopefully it's warmed up by then. We've had a very long winter this year, and it's been pretty cold, and so hopefully it's warmed up by then.
Yeah, I hope so.
So anyway, for people who aren't familiar with Skerryvore, you guys, like I said, are from Scotland, and it's kind of a mix of rock and folk music and a variety of other different styles. For people who aren't familiar with your group, do you want to kind of explain the type of music?
It's quite a hard thing to describe because there's so many influences. But ultimately we started with a very traditional background of traditional folk music. I was brought up in a small island called Tyree along with my brother, and we met the 2 other founding band members up there. So it was our traditional upbringing of playing bagpipes, accordions, and they had an upbringing in a lot more contemporary, i.e. rock. They were in brass bands and things. So there was an immediate fusion of styles right from the very start. And that sort of evolved over time to the point we've been writing our own music for the last decade plus. And I would say it's probably pop and rock come right to the front of the sound of the band, as particularly we've had more opportunity to be on radio playlists and things as well. So it's a hard thing to describe, but it's ultimately a fusion of traditional music and more contemporary music like rock and pop.
And I heard you say, your accent is pretty thick. So I'm sorry if you might have said this already. You said that one of the band members grew up playing the bagpipes?
Yes, both myself and my brother and Scott all learn bagpipes. I don't play bagpipes with the band now. I predominantly play accordion, but we have two bagpipers in the band. One set of bagpipes isn't enough, so we've got 2.
Yeah. I was reading on your website, Skerryvore got started in 2005, and it sounds like band members have come and gone over the years. You are one of the original founders of the band. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So the 4 original members are still there. We've always been there and always remained. The fiddle player Craig joined after that, and then we had a bass player Barry, and it's the bass position that's changed a couple of times. We've had 3 bass players over the duration of Skerryvore, and then Alan, who plays keys, joined as a producer for an album at first, but then we talked him coming back out onto the road on tour, and he's been with us since. And then Scott, our second bagpipe player, joined. He's the most recent band member. He's been with us 6 years now as well. So it's quite a big band. 8 members is a lot to move around.
Yeah, no kidding. So how did Skerryvore get started?
Ultimately, it was a chance meeting on my home island of Tyree. Fraser and Alec came up on holiday, and I was playing in the local bar, just playing the accordion during the summer. And as you get to know a lot of visitors, because it's a small island, you get to know a lot of people that come up. So we just got to know their family, and they asked if I would be interested in playing a gig with them back in their hometown of Livingston, which is near Edinburgh. And it just really snowballed from there. There wasn't a plan to be a band or anything as such. It just became a sort of summer hobby for 1 year, and it did very well. And we get asked to do more gigs and more gigs, and it's just snowballed from there. Really, so it was a chance meeting. It wasn't. We didn't know each other growing up, bar myself, my brother, and Alec and Fraser, and then the rest of the members sort of joined via university, done music courses and things as well. So it's it's been an amazing journey. I don't think any of us would have thought we'd been out here playing music in America when we started, but that's the way it's unfolded.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, how closely do people in Scotland watch the US in terms of musical trends and things like that? Is that something that's on your radar, or do you guys kind of do your own thing?
No, I think obviously the biggest bands and the biggest artists are on everyone's radar and what the world over. You know, the biggest American acts will be the biggest acts in the world. Will be on our radar, but I would say we're probably more aware of a lot of the Irish musicians and Irish bands that are over here. There's a lot of them, and we've got to know a lot of them over the years coming to the US. And we've been coming now for, I would say it must be around 10 years. Our first ever visit was to the Ryder Cup in Kentucky, Louisville. And we've been lucky enough to visit every year since then. So it's somewhere we enjoy coming. We love coming to tour, and I think we're on 36 states now. So we're doing okay. We've still got a bit to go, but we managed to get out to Alaska last year, so that's probably our furthest away one yet.
Yeah, very cool. Now, have you been to Idaho before?
Yes, we've been to. It's a gig I'll never forget. Actually, we were in Rexburg, Idaho, at the university there, and we didn't really know anything about the gig. Our agency booked it, and I think the night before we played in Salt Lake City in Utah, and it wasn't a particularly great gig. There was maybe only 50 people there, so we were all feeling a bit down after that. And we were going to this gig in Rexburg that we didn't know much about, and there was like 800 students came out to see us, and it was just a gig I'll never forget. Absolutely incredible. So
wow.
It's one I think all of us will always remember for that reason as well. So.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask you, since you've broken the international barrier and started touring around the world, how do you like performing in America? How do audiences receive you?
Yeah, we absolutely love it. And obviously there's lots of people that have got Irish or Scottish heritage, and they're always keen, to speak to us about that. Or when they see that there's a band that's come over from Scotland. A lot of people are curious about that. But I think some of our favourite shows are when we play at maybe a summer open concert series or something where people don't really know what they're coming to see, and then we have the shock factor of the guys coming on with bagpipes and mixing it with pop and rock and stuff. So we've always enjoyed coming here, and thankfully we've had a good reaction. We've been asked to come back, and we're signed to a music agency out here, and we generally come out maybe 2 or 3 tours a year. So it's definitely, aside from the UK, our most visited country in the world.
Yeah. Well, interesting. I'll have to come and check out your show at the Colonial Theater in Idaho Falls.
Yeah, please do.
See what it's like. I was curious. I did want to ask you the name Skerryvore. What does that mean? Where did that come from?
It's the name of a lighthouse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the lighthouse is one of the biggest lighthouses in Europe, and it's located 12 miles off my home island of Tiree, which is there's a really treacherous area of rocks, and a lot of ships went down. So if you Google Skerryvore, you'll probably see stuff about the band, but you'll also see stuff about the lighthouse, and it is an incredible piece of engineering to build it where they built it. There's a museum about it and things as well, and a lot of books and studies about it as well. So we didn't know what we were going to call the band. At first we didn't have a name at all, and then a friend suggested that we name ourselves after the lighthouse because he could see it from the island. So
okay. So what part of Scotland do you hail from?
I'm from Tiree, the island of Tiree, which is the most westerly of the Inner Hebrides. So it's a very small island. Only population's about 700 people.
So is that on the west coast?
Yeah, most westerly, yeah.
Okay. So as I was telling you before we started recording, I have ancestors that were from the Edinburgh area,
Yes,
like
yeah.
4 or 5 generations back. How close are you to Edinburgh?
We are quite far. Edinburgh's the east, but two of the band members, Fraser and Alec, the two other founding band members, they're from Livingston, which is a new town outside Edinburgh. So they're only about 15 miles from Edinburgh. So it's they're very familiar with it from there.
Yeah, okay. But the area you're from, it sounds like it's a rural area.
Yeah, very, very rural. As I said, a small population, and it's a sort of collection of islands around there on the west coast of Scotland. So,
Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about just kind of the government in Scotland and how it works?
yeah,
Is that okay?
yeah. That's
I'm just kind of curious, being someone who has family roots that I can trace back to Scotland. So who is the leader of Scotland? Is he called a president? Is he called, what is the title of the leader?
well. Ultimately, we in Scotland we have a first minister of Scotland, and he's recently just been appointed. We had a female first minister for the best part of a decade there, called Nicola Sturgeon, and she recently stepped down, and we now have a new first minister who's only been in the job a couple of months. So he is the first minister of Scotland, which is one of the devolved nations of the United Kingdom. But ultimately, we're still linked with England and Wales and Northern Ireland as the United Kingdom, and there's a prime minister of the whole of the United Kingdom as well. So the main government is housed in London for the United Kingdom, but as a devolved nation, we have a government building in Scotland in Edinburgh called Holyrood as well.
And I'm glad you brought up London, because admittedly, one of the initial things I thought of when I learned I was going to be talking to you is, the passing of Queen Elizabeth last year.
Yeah.
Was something that the whole world mourned over. I just wondered what relationship Scotland had with like the Queen of England.
I think Scotland had a very good relationship with the Queen in terms of she was very, very fond of Scotland. She stayed in Scotland for a lot of her time in Balmoral. Like many countries, including the US at the moment, that there is quite a lot of division amongst the population in terms of how they believe the country should be governed and who should be governing the country. So we've already in recent times had a public vote for independence for Scotland, and that was very marginally voted no. 52% to 48% said they didn't want Scotland to be an independent nation, but there still is a lot of push and drive for another independence referendum, which is I think it's something that's, I can understand why it's there as well, and a lot of us we were keen for independence because of the way things were governed, but it also doesn't help in current times when you've just had a pandemic and economies in a fragile place as well. So it's a difficult time for something like that to come to try and be pushed through. So it's there's a lot of people in Scotland that we speak to that would want independence, to be a nation of its own and not have any links to the United Kingdom. But it's a very, very difficult thing to make happen, and then how it would all be managed from there, given we've been in the United Kingdom for so long. So it's a rather long answer, but it's a rather complicated situation, if you can imagine. So
yeah. Well, and you mentioned the pandemic there and what you were saying. You guys, as so many other people around the world, you had to shut down your tour in 2020, in part of 21. And so you just recently started touring around the world again. Do people have misconceptions about Scotland? Have you interacted with Americans?
Yes, I think so. Sometimes they can be confused about where exactly Scotland is. It's amazing how many people seem to think Scotland's part of Ireland when we're in America. But there's also lots of people that are very interested about Scotland and Ireland and the United Kingdom because of their heritage, and I think that's always very interesting. It's people that they obviously are aware of their history, but they're maybe are keen to learn more. So it's amazing how many people do want to speak to us about Scotland and maybe past relatives or heritage, just like yourself. You're saying you had family in Edinburgh, and I think one of the nice things actually is there've been so many people that have come to visit Scotland after being at our concerts in the US, and they've come to see us play in Scotland and visit for us. And had it not been for the pandemic, we were going to be playing a 15-year anniversary concert at a castle in Inveraray, and as it stood, there was about 1,000 Americans coming that had bought tickets to come over to Scotland and come to the castle and see the show. So I think that's very nice that there's people that are keen to learn more about our tiny wee country, which is very, very small in the comparison to the United States, but has huge historic links to the country as well, in terms of just loads and different ways in history that Scotland's been linked to the US. But there's so many people that are wanting to learn so much more about it as well, which is nice.
Yeah. So again, your show in Idaho Falls, it's coming up October 22nd, or April 22nd, excuse me.
Yeah.
At the Colonial Theater in Idaho Falls. And I understand the main focus of it is to promote your latest album, which is called Tempest.
That's right, yeah.
And you have a new music video from that album called Everything You Need.
That's correct, yeah.
I was just watching the video before I was chatting with you. Anything you want to say about this album or that song?
That's so we signed our first world record deal last year after independently releasing music for over a decade. So this is our first time working with a record label worldwide, which has been a great experience, and having other people supporting our music. That song, Everything You Need, was playlisted on BBC Scotland, BBC Radio 2, which is one of the biggest radio stations in the UK. So we managed to get on the national playlist with that song as well, which has been great. So I think we're all just looking forward to having another album out and playing new music. I think we're out on tour now. This is the first time we've played a lot of the songs live, because some of these songs were written and recorded during lockdown. So it's nice now to be playing them to an audience and see that reaction. And we're looking forward to doing that in Idaho Falls as well in a few weeks.
Yeah. Ahead of the show in Idaho Falls, what kind of show can people expect?
High energy, loud, because there's multiple bagpipes and drums, but also a very interactive night. We like the crowd to join in. We generally try and teach them some songs or some parts of songs that they can join in with as well. And we always find the US audience is great with that. They love to interact and feel part of the show. So that I think people will get a mix of styles. They'll hear traditional stuff. They'll hear songs that are maybe a bit more like pop songs with traditional instruments involved in them as well. So hopefully it's interesting enough for people to come along and find out and experience what Skerryvore concerts look like.
Was there any particular place you visited in Idaho during your last trip here? Was there any restaurant or landmark?
No, because we didn't actually get a lot of time. Last time we pretty much drove in to do the concert and then had to drive out that night and get back to Salt Lake City to fly. So it'll be good this time, because we have a couple of nights in Idaho. We'll actually get to spend a wee bit more time, which is nice as well. So
yeah, okay. I was just going to say.
But I'll tell you, actually, somewhere else we were in Ketchum, Idaho, on the last tour, and that was an amazing experience as well. We got to stay in an absolutely beautiful hotel, and I think Tom Hanks lives in Ketchum, Idaho, and Arnold Schwarzenegger and stuff as well. So I remember it just being out of nowhere, this lovely town, and it was a great gig and a beautiful hotel we stayed at there as well. So hopefully we'll get to return to that at some point along the way as well.